The movie begins with a child psychologist sitting with a little girl named Soren. The girl looks clearly upset and tense when the doctor turns on the camera to record the session. The doctor asks her to start from the beginning, and Soren begins telling her story. She explains that her mother married a man named Do-kyun some time ago, but soon after the wedding, her mother passed away. Since then, Soren has been living with her stepfather. Soren continues and says that Do-kyun was assigned to work on a construction site located on an island called Hwan Island, also known as the Governor's Island. Because of that, they had to move there. After her mother's death, Soren was never happy again. She barely spoke and didn't like her stepfather at all. Later, she transferred to a new school on the island. She had the chance to make new friends, but she preferred being alone. Her stepfather had to work all night as a foreman on a tunnel construction project. Due to several explosions that happened during the work, the island's residents were forbidden from visiting the construction site again. One night, Soren opened her phone and started reading articles about wormholes. Ever since her mom died, she's been wanting to escape the world, and reading about that gave her some hope. Maybe she could find a way out. She got obsessed with supernatural creatures and mysterious phenomena, and she spent a lot of time online talking to people who shared the same interests, even using the school's computers. By accident, she once left her computer open, and when she came back, she found all her classmates gathered around it reading her comments. They burst out laughing and made fun of her badly. On her way home, Soren met a boy named Sung-min, who lived in an orphanage. He introduced himself kindly and tried to be friendly, but she ignored him. The next day during lunch, Soren walked past Sung-min and his friends while they were talking about what she had written online about wormholes. Trying to catch her attention, Sung-min made up a story, saying he had entered another dimension after reading her posts. That same day, he followed her on her way home and told her he believed everything she wrote. From that day on, the two of them started talking about supernatural stuff and became very close friends. Soren even invented a secret language only the two of them could understand so they could communicate in secret. They began using it every day, leaving notes for each other in her notebook. After school, they would go out exploring together, searching for ghosts and mysterious things. One day, Sung-min took Soren to an abandoned wooden house in the forest. Don't let your mind wander. It was just kids being curious. They explored the house, talked about ghosts, found some candle molds, and carved drawings on them. Soren began to really like Sung-min and suddenly kissed him, catching him completely off guard. One day, Soren saw Sung-min and 3 of his friends planning to sneak into the construction site where the explosion happened, just to see what was left. She decided to join them. They walked through the forest so the adults wouldn't see them and stop them. When they arrived, they climbed over the fence, but one of the boys got scared and ran back home. The rest hid behind a small hill, waiting for something to happen, but nothing did. While wandering through the forest, they found a small cave and decided to explore it. One by one, they went inside and found something glowing in the water. Soren guessed it was a meteorite. Sung-min took off his clothes and jumped in to grab it. When he pulled it out, the light suddenly went out. Looking closely, the kids realized it looked like an egg. One of them, named Tae, said it might be the time ghoul's egg, because his grandfather once told him that on the night of a full moon, a cave suddenly appears in the mountains. Inside lives the time ghoul, and anyone who enters it comes out older. The others laughed at him, saying, "Come on, that's ridiculous. We went in and out, and nothing happened." Then Soren realized she had forgotten her hairpin in the cave, a precious gift from her late mother, so she hurried back to get it. Meanwhile, the boys stayed behind guarding the egg. Soren found her hairpin, but she also noticed that the glowing egg had reappeared in the water. She ran outside, only to find the egg shattered, and her friends gone. She searched frantically for them in the woods until nightfall. Exhausted and scared, she ended up spending the night in the forest. The next day, the police began searching for the missing kids. A judge assigned investigators to the case. Later, they found Soren in the forest. Luckily, she was still alive and unharmed. At the hospital, the investigator asked her what happened to the other kids. Soren told him everything about the cave and the glowing egg, but none of the adults believed her. She took them to the forest to show them the cave, but it was gone, completely vanished after the full moon night. Days later, the police found the body of one of the boys, Jae-wook, washed up on a beach about 20 kilometers away from the town. The autopsy showed he died from a heart attack. 2 weeks later, the case officially changed from a missing persons case to a kidnapping case, as the other 2 children were still missing. As for Soren, she returned to her old life completely lost and confused, because no one believed a single word she said, even though she kept insisting that she was telling the truth. One day, Soren heard a strange noise outside her house. When she went out to check, she saw a man running into the forest. She chased after him, running deep among the trees, until she got exhausted and fell to the ground. The man stopped too, slowly walked toward her, and looked at her as if he were hypnotized. Soren froze in shock. Then, for the first time, the man spoke. He told her that he was Sung-min, her childhood friend who had gone missing after the cave incident. The moment she heard his name, Soren snapped out of her shock, burst into tears, and ran away as fast as she could. She stopped only when she found herself standing in front of Do-kyun's car. She hurriedly told him what had happened. Soon after, the police received a report about the incident and began searching the forest for the man, believing he was the one who had kidnapped the missing children. The investigator asked Soren about the man, and she said he claimed to be Sung-min. The police couldn't find him, but they did discover Soren's old notebook, the one she and Sung-min used to leave secret notes for each other in their made-up language. Soren was completely shocked when she saw the notebook because it was now filled with new entries from Sung-min, describing everything that had happened after she went into the cave to retrieve her mother's hairpin. In their secret code, he wrote that curiosity had driven him and his friends to find out what was inside the glowing egg, so Sung-man smashed it open before Soren came back. But the egg was empty, which disappointed them all. When Soren didn't return from the cave, Sung-min went inside to look for her and found her frozen in place. He tried to talk to her and move around her, but she didn't respond at all. A few moments later, Sung-man noticed a droplet of water floating in the air. He rushed outside and saw that even the birds above were frozen mid-flight. The kids went back to the town and found that everyone, even their families, was frozen. That's when they realized that time had completely stopped for the entire world, except for them. At first, they were thrilled, treating themselves like rulers of the world. They ate and drank whatever they wanted, slept whenever they pleased, and played all day long. But after a month, boredom set in. They decided to leave the island and go to another one to see if there were any other people who could still move. Unfortunately, their plan failed. The ocean was frozen too, which meant their boat couldn't move at all. Back in the present, Soren became certain that the man she saw in the forest really was Sung-min. She stopped reading for a moment, realizing she needed to keep the police away from the forest so they wouldn't arrest him. So she told them she'd been mistaken about seeing anyone. The police believed her and left, allowing her to keep reading the notebook. In his notes, Sung-min continued his story. Months later, he and his friends decided to live in a tent deep in the woods. Over time, Jae-wook's health began to worsen due to his breathing condition, and his inhaler had stopped working. One night, Jae-wook slowly suffocated and died right in front of his friends. Devastated, they buried his body near the shore. Strangely, his body froze in place just like everyone else's. 5 years passed, and the world was still frozen. The kids had grown into teenagers, isolated from everyone, yet still holding on to a tiny bit of hope that one day time would move again. Sung-min believed that when they turned 20, everything would return to normal. They even stole money from the frozen people, thinking they'd be rich when the world came back. But when they finally turned 20, nothing happened, and one by one, they started losing hope completely. They eventually moved into the old wooden house in the forest. One day, Sung-min broke down and screamed in frustration, begging for everything to stop. Of course, no one could hear him. From a distance, his friend Tae-shik watched, having lost every last bit of hope himself. Later, Sung-min noticed that the shape of the moon was changing, a sign that the world was finally returning to normal. He searched everywhere on the island for Tae-shik until he reached the edge of a cliff, where he found his friend's clothes lying on the ground. Realizing that Tae-shik had jumped into the sea, he dove in after him to try to save him. At that exact moment, time began to move again. Sung-min surfaced from the water, stunned to see the world around him finally alive again. After finishing the notebook, Soren ran back into the forest and found her friend waiting in the old wooden house. There, they decided to finally tell the world their story, though either of them was sure anyone would ever believe it. At the same time, footage from the security cameras showed the police that Sung-min was in the forest, and they immediately assumed he was the missing kidnapper. That night, Sung-min went to Soo-rin's room to give her some emotional support. After living alone for so long, he didn't really know how to deal with people anymore. He was afraid he might hurt himself or end his life just to escape the pain he'd been through. The next day, Tae-shik's father and Soo-rin's mother went to the construction site and started blaming Do-kyun for their son's disappearance. They thought the explosion at the site had killed their son and that Soo-rin was making up stories to protect someone. She was already fed up with everything. Meanwhile, Soo-rin and Sung-min went to the shelter where he used to live. She explained everything to the woman in charge, then went outside to call Sung-min. What she didn't know was that her stepfather was waiting for her outside the shelter, and as soon as she stepped out, he grabbed her by the arm and pulled her away. Sung-min then went to see the woman who ran the shelter, the one he used to think of as a mother, and told her everything he remembered from his childhood before time had stopped for him. She was completely shocked because everything he said was true, but still, she couldn't bring herself to believe it. Do-kyun locked Soo-rin in her room, but Sung-min snuck in through the back door and freed her. The two of them escaped together, trying to figure out what to do next. Soo-rin suddenly remembered that she'd seen another glowing egg in the cave back when she was searching for her mother's hairpin. She suggested they use that egg to stop time again, and that later she'd grow up, just like Sung-min, and come back to prove to everyone that they weren't lying, clearing his name once and for all. But Sung-min refused. He knew how painful it was to live in a frozen world, and even worse, to live completely alone. With a kind look, he told her he'd rather be seen as a criminal than have her go through the same suffering he did. Do-kyun returned home to find Soo-rin gone. He checked her phone and saw photos of her and Sung-min in the wooden house deep in the forest. That night, he went there, attacked Sung-min, and tried to drag Soo-rin home by force. But Sung-min fell to the ground, and they both ran away together again. The next morning, the police searched the wooden cabin. They believed the so-called kidnapper was manipulating Soo-rin and playing mind games to make her trust him. News of her disappearance spread across television, and the police were determined to catch them both before things got worse. A chase followed between the police and the two fugitives. Soo-rin, trying to protect Sung-min, turned herself in. Before they were separated, she asked him to meet her at the cave. During questioning, the detective tried to convince Soo-rin that the man she met wasn't really Sung-min, that he was lying to her. But she refused to believe it. She then asked to go to the restroom, slipped away, and ran straight to the cave. Once there, she pulled the glowing egg from the water and handed it to Sung-min, but he refused to return it. He knew she wanted to use it to freeze time again. He was planning to surrender himself to the police, taking full responsibility for everything, including the deaths of his friends, so she could go free. He ran into the forest, with Soo-rin chasing after him, and soon the police joined the pursuit. They ended up on the edge of the same cliff where his friend had once jumped. The detective grabbed Sung-min by mistake, and in the chaos, accidentally shoved Soo-rin off the cliff. The detective lunged after her, managing to grab the edge just in time, barely hanging on. Sung-min tried desperately to reach them, but before he could, both Soo-rin and the detective fell. At that very last moment, to save them again, Sung-min smashed the egg and froze time once more. Soo-rin woke up seconds later to find herself lying on the beach next to the detective. She waited, wondering what Sung-min had done to save them. Even though only a single second had passed between them, it was clear that decades might have gone by for him, because he had sacrificed himself to bring her back. Later, she returned home and apologized to her stepfather during dinner for everything she'd done. For the first time, she called him Dad. Eventually, the detective met Soo-rin again and asked how they had survived that day. She didn't answer, but he knew then that she'd been telling the truth all along. He suggested that she give the media false information, say that the kidnapper had manipulated her, so that anyone who thought she was crazy or guilty would finally be proven wrong. In the final scene, Soo-rin sits in front of her therapist, finishing her story. The therapist, stunned by everything she heard, decides to write a book about it. Months later, Soo-rin moves to a new city to start high school. Before leaving, she meets her therapist again, who gives her a published copy of the book based on her story. On her way to the ferry, Soo-rin catches a glimpse of Sung-min through the car window. She runs out to find him, but he's gone. She then boards the ship headed for her new life, and there, on the upper deck, she finally sees Sung-min again. The two exchange a long, silent look, and that's how the movie ends. If you like the film, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments.